Today, I'm going to share with you five strategies to deal with MS relapses. If you live with MS, you know what I'm talking about, depending on where you're at in the spectrum of relapse remitting to progressive or primary progressive. So wherever you are on that spectrum, you may or may not be having relapses, but if you are in the right place. I'm Jen DeTracey. I am the founder of Women Thriving with MS. And what I do is I help guide women to discover how to move from surviving with MS to striving with MS to thriving with MS. And I do that through the Women Thriving with MS YouTube channel, Facebook group, and the membership We Thrive, as well as coaching that I do and online courses. So much goodness available to you. So let's get started on what those 5 tips are. Number 1, when it comes to relapses, is all about tracking. Now I'm going to share with you, before I go into the details around tracking, what happened for me. So right now, I'm located in Athens, Greece. I've been here for almost 70 days. I'm just going to have a sip of water here. So one thing that I've noticed is that often my throat gets a little dry since living with MS. So another thing to contend with in life. I knew that when I came to Greece, that I needed to be prepared for this trip in case a relapse happened. And that's exactly what took place. Now for me, the main relapse that I experience that's consistent, something consistent with MS, go figure, is vertigo, a vertigo relapse. And what comes with that are headaches, massive headaches, brain-splitting headaches, and the vertigo. So nausea, a little bit of blurred vision. It's not as bad as it used to be for some reason, which is great. But I have some special items in my toolkit that I use to help support me in managing my life while I'm moving through that relapse. So about halfway into my trip, all of a sudden, I started to feel very nauseous. Very, very nauseous. And at first, I thought it was this liquor that I drank. It's funny because I'm not a drinker, because liquor has never been something, alcohol has never been something that feels really good in the, after about 5-10 minutes. I love a glass of red wine. I may enjoy it at the time, but even 10-15 minutes later, I don't feel very good. So it kind of takes away all the pleasure of it. There I was drinking this hard liquor. I was in an environment where I was at a restaurant and my sweetie's relative, a cousin of a cousin, was there. And in Greece, you get treated to a meal by people that live in that country. There's a lot of generosity there. So there was so much food, and then there was this alcohol. And it's basically, it'd be strong, like a shot of vodka, for example, white, clear liquor. I can't remember the name of it in this moment. I will post a picture up in the corner if you're watching this on YouTube so that you can see that. So I drank the liquor. I put it into a glass. What you do is you put it into a thin, tall glass, a bunch of ice cubes. There was a bit of this much liquor in and added water. And I just was sipping away at it. And I was doing that as a way to express my appreciation, even though in my gut, I knew that was not good. So the next morning, I was doubled up in bed. I felt horrible. And at first, I just thought, this is a hangover. Has it ever happened to you where you are moving into a relapse, yet there's other things that have happened and you're like, oh, maybe it is this, or maybe it's that. Well, this is what took place for me. It wasn't until later that day when I realized this is not going away no matter how much water I drink. And I just feel horrible. And I thought, wait a second here. I'm feeling nauseous. I'm feeling horrible. This is a vertigo relapse. And I actually had a little bit of a sign of it a few days before. And at that time, I had started taking a homeopathic remedy that my homeopathic doctor gave me. And it's something that is in a little green vial like this, or container. And they're just little circular pills, like little sugar pills. And I was just taking those because I could tell that I was a little bit off. But then when this happened, and it really took me out, I just wanted to be in darkness, had the curtains in the hotel room that I was staying in closed. I didn't want sound. I was curled up into the fetal position. It was really horrible. And I had a massive, massive headache, which is also related to a vertigo relapse. And those headaches can happen the whole time I'm going through it. Fortunately, in the last several days, I haven't had to take any Tylenol or Advil or anything for headaches. So that is great news. I did get through it, and what I want to walk you through today are the 5 strategies that I had in place before taking this trip. Things that I knew that I needed to bring along with me. Now let's start at the beginning, because if you are new to being diagnosed, you may not have a rhythm or a knowledge or an awareness around the probability that you're going to have a certain type of relapse over and over again. Now, I'm speaking from my own experience, and I'm not a medical doctor. I'm a woman that has been living with multiple sclerosis for over 11 years. And in the beginning, when I was having these vertigo relapses post-diagnosis, they were so bad, the vertigo was so bad, my vision was so blurred, and my perception was so off that I could not even leave my house. The brightness of the sun and the leaves and the flowers and all of that was too much stimulation. And the cause of this activation that happens is due to a lesion on the eye center of my brain. It's not an ear thing. It's a different kind of motion sensitivity. So yes, people can have inner ear issues, but there can also be lesions or something connected with the eye center. And in my case, that's a lesion that's connected with the eye center. At the time that I first started having these, I didn't know what to do. I just lay on the floor in my living room or in bed and listened to audiobooks for days at a time. And then when I started to feel a little bit better, I would go out at night when the brightness wasn't there, but it felt like the cars were really close to me and that I was going to be hit with them. So I knew my peripheral was off. It was so early in my diagnosis, and I was in so much crisis about being diagnosed and my life changing, that I really didn't have any reference points. So looking back now, over 11 years later, it's so much easier to talk about this. And what happened over time, ironically, in my case, and I feel very blessed this way, doesn't make having vertigo a great situation to be in, but from the school of hard knocks, of that one time that I had that very bad relapse, I was taking gravel about 4 to 5 times a day. And I didn't realize that you can overdose on gravel. So even though the relapse, which with vertigo, it works like this. It starts off and it builds and builds and builds, and it peaks. And then once it peaks, it drops down. I learned this from my neurologist. So there's a point where it will peak and then it will start to drop, but you still feel horrible. So I had peaked in this massive relapse and it was starting to drop off, but because I was taking copious amounts of gravel and it was building up in my system, I actually was still having vertigo-like symptoms. I was feeling very spaced out and dizzy and disoriented. And I actually went to emergency and they told me, you're overdosed on gravel. I didn't know that. And it was kind of interesting because at that time, my parents were flying in to Vancouver, where I live, Vancouver, Canada, to come visit me. And I had asked a friend to drive me to emergency. And then I had some communication with my parents who were living in the area where the hospital was going to be. They were staying in that place. And I said, come meet me at emergency. It's crazy, right? I think I really freaked them out. Have you ever freaked out your parents or family in a situation like that? So I found out that I was taking too much gravel. That was very useful to know. I also found out that there was a medication that I could take. It was quite expensive, but they had given me a couple of pills and a prescription. And I took that and it helped. So that was good news. And then my mom said to me, she said, you know, I take something called meclizine, and it really helps with motion sickness. And she said, I can give you some of it. I can't give you all because I might need it in case I get motion sick, but you can try it out. And it was a saving grace. It was like, the skies had opened up, the sun had come out, and I was able to function even in future vertigo relapses. The challenge for me, the biggest challenge, was that meclizine, known in the US as Bonine, and there may be other names for it. I can't remember what it's called in the UK, and there may be other places in Europe that have it, is not available. Meclizine is not available in Canada. So what did I do? The next time that when I got it, I had to go across the border to the US and buy some. But at that time, I didn't realize that I could buy generic meaning cheaper, a no-name brand, and buy it in huge quantities. These are chewable tablets that I bought. They're 100. So now what I do is I would buy 2 of these bottles of 200 chewable tablets and have them on hand whenever I need them. And when I'm in the beginning and peaking in that vertigo relapse, I need to take the maximum amount, which is 4 a day, which I try and stretch out because taking more is not a good idea. So that has been a lifesaver. And that was something that changed my ability to manage this vertigo relapse. Now, you may have different kind of relapses. Again, I mentioned I get bad headaches. They may even be migraines. They're just really excruciating. And what my neurologist told me to do was she recommended 2 extra strength Tylenol and 1 Advil, Motrin. I like the gel because it goes in quickly, but you do need to eat before you take it because Advil is very hard on the gut lining. So I take that power-packed painkiller, and sometimes it doesn't even work, but most of the time it will bust through the headache, at least in the short term. So I might take it and then have another massive headache 6 hours later and need to take it again. So those are the things that I've been doing. 2 Tylenol, 1 Advil to bust through that headache during a relapse, as well as taking meclizine. Now, I don't know how many years it's been now. I would say probably maybe 7, maybe even 8. I started going to see a homeopathic doctor, and I mentioned a little bit earlier in this video that I took a homeopathic just when I start to feel a little bit off. He tested things with me, and he discovered that there was a specific remedy. It would be considered my constitutional remedy, and that can shift over time when you're doing homeopathic treatments. I take homeopathics regularly, and so this is consistent. The constitutional remedy is for emergency purposes. So when I was getting ready to go on this trip to Greece, I made sure that I had meclizine. Unfortunately, I just barely have enough, and I'll tell you more about that in a minute or two. I barely have enough, but I was able to squeak through with what I had, and I looked up what I could get over in Greece, so I'll circle back to that. As soon, though, as I was fully aware, yes, I'm in vertigo relapse mode, that's when I took out the heavy guns. This little test tube, again, is the constitutional remedy. It's like little tiny beads. I put them in half a cup of water, and I drink it. And it's quite strong. It's about almost 5 times as strong as the ones that I could take if I need them just on a periodic basis. And I take 1 tube each day for 3 days of this remedy. And what it does is it doesn't take away the vertigo, but it busts through it faster. So what I mean by that is, let's say that it takes 7 days for the vertigo to peak. If I were to just not take anything homeopathic, or I wasn't taking steroids, for example. These are steroid tablets. Then it would then take 7 days to come down, and then it would kind of like have a waning period, right? So that's like 14 days plus that residual tail of vertigo at the end. Kind of nasty. What this homeopathic does is it speeds up the process, so it pushes my system to the peak faster. So I probably noticed, I would say that it was maybe day 2 or 3 that I was on that journey of going up. So by taking that homeopathic, within a day, I was peaking. I was like peaking seriously, and I was peaking for a couple of days, and then it dropped down much faster on the other side. So it's not like it's a magic pill that everything goes away. No, it's not like that. But it doesn't move it through my system faster so that I can function better and not be curled up into a little ball and want to just sob and cry and lock out the world. So that's good. On this trip, so I had that. So I had my motion sickness. These are non-drowsy, the bonine or meclizine. Non-drowsy, very important for me. And then my superpower homeopathic, that took a while for my homeopathic doctor to figure out what was best for me, and that may change in the future. And then I also brought with me, and these are actually quite old, this prescription. I carry them with me when I travel. They are prednisone, and I do not like to use it unless it was a serious emergency where my body, like my left side, wasn't working, which would be similar to when I was diagnosed. If something like that happened, I'd be all over the prednisone. I know, though, from experience of doing drip, for example, that I felt batshit crazy. I just like emotionally went to a very bad place in it and wasn't able to sleep and was angry and sobbing, and it was very difficult. Now, of course, I had just been diagnosed, so maybe now, after 11 and a half years, I would have more stability with that. This is just an emergency to have on hand because you just don't know, right? You just don't know. Maybe I could have a different kind of relapse. Maybe something else could show up for me. The other thing I did while I'm traveling is I bought medical insurance. I bought medical insurance so that I would be prepared for an emergency, because I'm not going to be paying a big bill in a country that I'm not familiar with. So yeah, if you are traveling, note to self. I think it's really important to have your emergency kit on hand, and this is kind of the planning part. And I'll circle back to the 5 tips because I basically am telling you my story, and we're going to circle back to those tips. The last thing I want to say in terms of my emergency kit is that because I was concerned about running out of meclizine for motion sickness, I looked up online before I left Canada, what else could I take? And there's something called Dramamine that's supposedly similar. So while I was in this tiny little town, I asked them if they could give me some of that. And they said, well, the only thing we have is travel sickness gum, travel gum. They have a little picture on here for airplane, ship, car, and bus. So this is what they look like. And I've never taken travel gum before. They told me to put it in my mouth, half an hour before, chew very slowly. Well, what this travel gum did for me is it froze my mouth. And it tastes horrible. I don't know if it helped or not. I just used it a couple times when I was getting on a bus or a train and I knew I was going to be in motion. And I was trying to stretch out my meclizine so that if I needed to use meclizine for a prolonged period of time longer than I expected, I had that as a backup plan. So I did not like this at all. Okay, so let me go through the 5 strategies specifically. So tracking. It is so important that right from the beginning of when you start to have your relapses, when you live with MS, to start tracking them. And if you haven't, that's okay too. You can do that now. I know approximately it can be every 3, 4, 5, 6 months that I could have a vertigo relapse. Sometimes there's been a space of a couple of years where I haven't had one, but that's very rare, but it's happened. It's happened. And so I know I need to keep things on hand. So when you track, you want to track when it happened, when it started, what happened during it, what symptoms are you having, well, what's going on, how long is it lasting. Those are very important. So when it started, what's happening during it, like are you having that peak situation? It depends, right? When I was first diagnosed with MS and I lost the ability in the left side of my body, it was a very different situation than vertigo. I don't know if I would say it was a peak in the same way, but there were signs of it. And it just got worse and worse. And then I went into the hospital and they just gave me steroids and it went away. So that's a very different situation, and your situation may be entirely different too. So just imagine yourself at home, you're living your life, you have a relapse, whatever sort of relapse that might be, you track it, you put down the symptoms of what you're experiencing, how long did it last, and also how often are they happening? Are you having them once a year, every second year, 5 years, or every 3 months? What does that look like for you? What's your rhythm with having them? I knew that there was a possibility that I would have vertigo relapse while I was traveling because I'm away for 70 days. So almost 3 months, but not quite. And I hadn't had a vertigo relapse in a while. And when there's stressful things or a change in environment, it's more probable it's going to happen, right? Even if it's fun to be adventuring, there's a lot of change. There's a lot of adapting. So that's a factor. So that's number 1, track. Number 2 is to know what works best for you. What works best for you? For me, it's about resting. It's about taking the motion sickness pill, meclizine, 4 times a day. It's about making sure that I have that homeopathic crisis emergency remedy that I can take, because that helps bust it through, and that I know that when I start getting a lot of headaches over a period of days, I'm moving towards that relapse. And I need my Tylenol extra strength, and I need to be stocked up on my Advil. That's like ibuprofen. Some people know it as Motrin. So that's number 2, is know what works best. And then number 3 is know what doesn't work. What doesn't work for you? Well, this travel gum definitely doesn't work for me. Taking gravel 4 times a day does not work for me because I overdosed. So what doesn't work for you? As you play around with that, as you figure it out, know what does and doesn't work for you. Number four is have a plan. Have a plan, because it's possible that if you had a relapse, you're going to have another one. It may not be exactly the same. In my case, because I've been having these vertigo relapses for 11 years, and I know I have the lesion on the eye center of my brain, I know I'm going to have another one. It's very probable, even if it was 5 years out. I need to have my little toolkit. I need to be prepared. There was a time in the past year where I did have my relapse and I didn't have my emergency homeopathics. And I regretted not pre-ordering them, because by the time I received them in the mail, which was like a week and a half later, it was almost too late. I was already through the thick of it. So that was a really good learning for me to realize, hey, I need to have these on hand, my emergency homeopathics, all the time. They always have to be in my medicine cabinet for when that time comes, or in my purse, or wherever I am when I travel or at home. I need to know where they are, and I need to have them. So what is that for you? What do you need to have? What do you need to plan ahead for the possibility that you might have a relapse? Maybe you need to have steroids on hand. Maybe your doctor needs to prescribe you those and tell you to call before you take them, but at the same time have them on hand because it's a necessity, because you want to be taking them right away. That's the thing. When you have a relapse, you want to be able to nip it in the butt in the best way you can, knowing what you know. And so that's number 4, is planning ahead, having that plan. And number five is asking for support. Having support, whether it's even over the phone. I know that for the first many years, a couple of years that I was living with MS relapses, I was living by myself, or at least a year and a half. And so I couldn't leave the house. So maybe I needed someone to bring in groceries. Maybe I just wanted to talk to someone on the phone because I felt isolated and lonely and could manage, but it was hard. So find that support, ask for that support, and plan that out ahead of time. Who are your go-to people going to be? You have someone that you can count on that could pick up groceries for you, that could pick up a prescription for you. And if not, what options do you have? Do you have an option to use a delivery service to bring something to you? Do you have people you can talk to on the phone? If you've got a spouse or partner, what are they willing to do and committed to support you? These are important things. So these are the 5 strategies in order to deal with an MS relapse. Let me just go through them quickly for you again. Number 1, track. Track your relapses. When do they happen? How often do they last? What are their symptoms? How frequent are they happening? And number two, know what works best for you. If you've tried things and you know that something works well, have that on hand. Make sure it's there for you. Really pay attention to what works. Maybe during that time you need something that's going to calm your system. For me, I was drinking a lot of chamomile tea. So that seems to work. It helps the nausea a bit. Doesn't solve it completely, but it's just a nice add-on. What are those add-ons for you? What works well for you as you're going through this? And by tracking it, you'll be able to remember it later. For me, it's like old hat now. It's been happening for such a long time. Also, know what doesn't work. For me, the travel gum does not work. It doesn't. I have it as a backup, but it's not a good option for me. I'd rather just pop a gravel if I ran out of my meclizine. So what doesn't work for you, be really aware of that so that you know for next time. And number four, have a plan. Have items in stock. Know that there's a possibility that you are going to have another relapse. And it could be similar, could be a little bit different, but it's very probable. And number five, ask for support. Ask for support in the way that you can, whether you live by yourself or with a friend, a roommate, a significant other, a sibling, family, whatever that might be for you, or if you're living alone and dealing with it, what support systems could you have in place that are realistic and that can help you? I'm Jen DeTracey. I'm the founder of Women Thriving with MS. Check out the goodness below. Write your comments below. Tell me your experience, and I look forward to seeing you soon. Bye now.